Oh, I've been recording because I've been ready. Thank you so much for checking.
Thank you for that. Hey there, beautiful people. Welcome to FANTI, the podcast for all those complex and complicado conversations around the gray areas in our lives. I had brownies for breakfast because I felt like that this morning. Jarrett Hill.
Yikes, that sounds like a call for help. Everything all right?
I don't know if it is, but I've been like testing brownie recipes.
We'll save that for after the show. We'll save that for after the show. That's FANTI Uncut, okay? I'm Tre'vell Anderson. Welcome back, beautiful people. Coming up on the show today, we're going to have a very complex and complicado conversation about the Super Bowl, about Ursher at the Super Bowl halftime performance. Yeah, we'll get into it. But first, Jarrett has a pass the popcorn that just buckle up.
Don't do me like that, friend. Don't do me like that. I want to wade into straight people's business for a moment, because which we should never do probably. But I find this conversation interesting, and I feel like we hear this conversation probably like every year and a half, like in a big way on social media. And recently Tyler Perry's been catching hell because of some comments that he made.
Comments that he made again. This isn't the first time.
Sure. Basically saying that black women should be more accepting of black men who may make less money, but they essentially love them well and treat them well and respect them and give them, all of these different things. I want to play the clip of what he said in its entirety. It's about 2 minutes long, but I think it's important to have all of what he said just to give some context. Now, here in the conversation, host Crystal Renee Hazlett has mentioned that she and Tyler, who are friends and colleagues, had been at Tyler's island, and he'd been talking to her about her love life in particular because they're close and they know each other. She said he told her that she needed to meet a man. She needed a man to meet her at her worth. And he responds saying to her that that doesn't mean money. And that's what this is saying.
And anybody who can't do that, that doesn't mean they're not worthy of you. That means that they need to either attempt, try, learn, find out enough about you to be able to figure out what that is.
Yes.
And that's not money because you listen, a lot of women, especially black women, and I might get in trouble for saying this, but I will. In our society right now, black women are making a lot more money for the most part than black men. Right? There are a lot of black men who are successful, but for the most part, black women are making the money. So if you can find love, if that man works, at whatever job and is a good man and is good to you and honors the house and honors his wife and does what he can, because his gift may not be your gift.
Exactly.
That is okay. That's not somebody who's beneath you.
Yeah.
That's somebody who came to love you at your worth, right?
Yes.
And as long as he's secure in himself to know that, yep, she makes most of the money, all I can pay is the light bill, as long as she's comfortable enough to say, I'm gonna cover the mortgage and all the other stuff, you've handled the light bill, baby, you can take me to dinner every now and then, that is fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah.
But that's so hard for a lot of people to take in because that means, no, I need somebody they need to make 5 times more and I got to have, well, go on, keep your list, baby.
Yeah.
God bless you, hope it happens. Go on, keep your list. But when you talk about just someone to love you and support you, I know people whose men can't touch what they make. But when you see them together, that love, that support, that I got you, babe, it's a beautiful thing.
It is.
Yeah,
It is.
yeah.
So I wanted to play the full clip in its context because every time I've heard people talking about this clip, they always say, well, I don't have this clip out in context. And obviously this is an hour and 15-minute long interview, so we can't give the whole thing. But Tyler, after this, then goes on to talk about Oprah and Stedman, having a close relationship with them and seeing Stedman in various different instances with Oprah and how that relationship was. But I think that's kind of always like the example that people give because, Oprah makes more money than most everybody, right? And Stedman has his own life or whatever. I'm not really here to give an opinion because I don't think that there's like a lack of men's opinions in the world right now, especially around this kind of topic. But I do want to contextualize this conversation with some data that I rarely hear included in this conversation. And Tre'vell and I have talked about this a little bit, and I think we see it a little bit differently. But like, there are a few pieces of data that I always...
Surprise.
Well, right. When has that ever happened? But like, I always think about a few different pieces of data that inform the way that I think about this, at least. And I think that might be, useful to other people as you're considering this conversation, specifically Black women thinking about wanting to find a Black man and what that would look like. I was looking for like the most recent data that I could find, but this data has always, adjusted. But like, statistically speaking, there are more Black women than there are Black men. I remember hearing this data back more than a decade ago that there were like literally 2 million more Black women than there are Black men. As of most recently, the data is that there are 88 Black men for every 100 Black women. Comparatively with white folks, that would be 97 white men for every 100 white women. And we know that like women are, I think, 51% of the population, if we're not mistaken, but like there are literally more women. I also would want to note here that like the Census Bureau doesn't collect data in the major census for the various different genders, but there actually is legislation, or there is a request now recently in the last week I've seen in the AP that there's an idea of ways that we can start testing questions around sexual orientation and gender identity in their surveys. This information to me it's not new, right? We've been talking about how many more Black women there are than Black men for a long time, but like I feel like it's never a part of the conversations that I'm hearing when people are discussing this, and like Black women wanting to find a Black man that's on their level and all of these other things, right? I also want to note here that like Black women are the most educated group in the country, right? And I feel like a part of this conversation that we always hear is that Black men aren't on my level when we're talking about education, when we're talking about money. There's obviously like some emotional and maturity things in there as well that are part of the conversation. But like Black women are the most educated group in this country, period. Right. And that is amongst all of the different demographic groups. And we know that also means that Black women outpace Black men in education. And so if there are less Black men, and we know that Black women are outpacing those men in the way that they are educated, like just putting those two pieces of data together, to me, I'm always fascinated by the conversations around like the level of the Black man that's available. And then I think about the ways that we continually have conversations around interracial dating and queerness and the ways that like our relationships might need to look a little bit different. And I don't think you can just tell someone like, oh, go be queer, right? But I do think that we have to have more conversations about like, maybe we need to be considering different things in our relationships or the different people that we might be interested in dating when we're talking about who Black folks are looking for, and specifically who Black women are looking for. I just think it's interesting from a data perspective that like even if we don't consider the sampling of Black men that we know exist and factor in the ways that mass incarceration have taken a lot of Black men out of society, if we take out the way that, the homosexual agenda is queering all the straight men out there, and all of the other ways that like it makes less and less Black men available, I just think like those things in context with each other say to me like, we've got to be having a different conversation about the ways that we're dating. And specifically, when I'm thinking about my friends who are Black women, like that conversation is just always so interesting to me. Now tell me why you think I'm wrong.
Well, no, I think you actually set it very high up in your whatchamacallit, which is, quote, I'm not really here to give an opinion because I don't think there's a lack of Black men's opinions in the world right now about this, end quote. Beyond that, though, I too do not try to traffic in cis and het people's business, because when you try to rationalize behavior under cis heteropatriarchy, it will always leave you baffled. And I also think that like attempting to take a data approach to this conversation, but also having to, provide those caveats for what is incomplete data, because it's not data that actually reflects, right, the lived vast experiences of people, let alone Black people, right? Because it does not take into account queerness, and that's both, same sex, same gender queerness attraction, but also bisexual people, right? And the rest of them, the pans and the pluses and the asterisks as well. and so I say that to say then that, having that conversation both from this, kind of broader cultural kind of perceived sentiment view, which is what Tyler Perry was doing, but also trying to have the conversation from the data point of view are ultimately flawed. It is also always interesting to me that in this conversation that Oprah and Stedman are the ones that are, brought up as the leading example. But the reality is we're not talking about Oprah and Stedman's. Vastly speaking, we're talking about Keisha's and Tyrone's. You know what I mean? We're talking about, Shantae and DeAndre.
I need you to...
What? I'm just saying.
We're also talking about Dana and Mark.
We are. Are those people who we know?
And Crystal and John.
Okay. I didn't want to get specific, because you got to have this conversation also with, plausible deniability. You don't want your straight friends to get, a stray bullet on accident. You know what I mean? But I say that to say that, I often think about, how in this conversation, it often feels like women are because they are in this instance and in this conversation, we privilege them in a certain way in the articulation of desire and relationships, and Tyler Perry saying keep your list, girl, see if it works out for you, right? Anyway, and so in this instance where we're privileging women to have to make these decisions. Tyler Perry says release your list, and you're looking for somebody who's meeting you at your worth. And I think, and I should say, I think that the impetus, the spirit of that statement, finding somebody who can meet you at your worth, is actually a really good one, right? But I think that we can stop there. Because your articulation of your worth might be different than my articulation and my worth, and that might factor in money for whatever reasons that it factors in money. And I think about the ways in which this conversation ultimately is another kind of another thing in society that tells women how they're supposed to be, how they're supposed to move in the world, for good and for bad, for the record. And men, listen. There are people out there who want their Shamar Moore in Diary of a Mad Black Woman, and there are people out there who want, the rich husband guy. Kyle, was it Kevin?
Kevin.
And so, yeah, I went longer on this than I planned to go. But it just is.
It's complex. It's complicado.
It also strikes me as interesting that somebody who is not, to the public's knowledge, in a committed relationship with anyone is giving anyone, and also is not one of these quote unquote, lower men, is giving this it's the Steve Harvey syndrome all over again.
I get that. I will be curious to see how we will look back at it in 10 years and 15 years.
But also, how many I can only literally go off of the people that I know, and the people that I know is obviously going to be skewed based on how I show up in the world and how I feel about things, etc.
Come on, sociologists.
But like, these conversations always presented as if all of these women are, you know, hating black men, or saying that black men, you know, can't rise to the occasion and pay the bills, or saying, and I just feel, it just hits me as, you know, as a little wonky in my spirit to assert that as fact and as truth and as reality, because I have so many examples in my life in which that's not the case, in which that's not the conversation. You know what I mean? And so who are y'all in community with? And what are you doing beyond, you know, articulating it in this way to help, you know, change that sentiment that is in your spaces? And again, this might be the sickness that comes with, you know, heterosexuality and cisgenderism. But, you know, y'all got to find a cure for that quickly. Y'all ain't tired?
Well, ask your doctor if FANTI is right for you. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to get into the Super Bowl. Ursher, baby. He's going to be at the Super Bowl. We're going to get into our mixed feelings around the halftime performances. That's next.
Hi, this is Lori Kilmartin.
And I'm Jackie Cation, and we have a podcast called The Jackie and Lori Show on Max Fun, and it's very exciting because what do we talk about?
Comedy.
Stand-up comedy. We both do stand-up comedy and have since the dawn of
Well,
Christ.
Jackie,
Is that offensive?
it is offensive to me because you've aged me. We started in the late 80s, and we're still here. You can't kill us.
So go to The Jackie and Lori Show on Max Fun and listen to that.
The Jackie and Lori Show. New episodes Monday, only on MaximumFun.org.
Welcome back, beautiful people. By now, you have heard the news that Ursher, baby, will be the Super Bowl halftime performer. This will be the second time that he participates in the show. First time headlining, but he also performed alongside the Boom Boom Pow, Black Eyed Peas, when they headlined the show back in 2011. And every year, right, there's so much conversation around who should have this gig. There was so many rumors swirling about Usher, about Taylor Swift, about, you know, who, you know, insert other Americana white woman here who should have the opportunity to make that performance. And then also conversation, right, about what the performance means or says, right, about where we are as a culture. I remember when, you know, when they had Beyonce do it and she ended up doing Formation, and how we just said that meant so much. And so we wanted to tease out some points in a very complex and complicado kind of way. I guess I want to start, Jarrett. Is Ursher a good selection for the halftime performance or not?
Usher, I feel like, is an on-time choice because, like, Usher's having such a moment right now with his Vegas residency and, like, having, you know, this big show that people are seeing, like, every night. And so I wouldn't have thought about Usher for a little while. I would have had, like, but, like, it makes perfect sense that it's Usher. And, like, Usher also has a lot of songs that the NFL uses, right? Like, that was one of the things I thought about with Rihanna last year as the performer. Like, there are so many times when I've seen Rihanna songs in promotions for the NFL and things like that. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've heard, yeah, right, in promotional things for sports. And so it makes sense.
Okay, so that is your criteria for why it makes sense. That's interesting. Oh, I didn't expect that. I believe that I think Usher is a great selection. I think Usher, as someone who has, you know, I went to his little show in Vegas, and it was wondrous. It was real good. It was, and I, you know, wasn't expecting to be as entertained as I was, but it was wonderful. So it is certain to me that he's going to turn that stadium in Las Vegas into a Cascade, because that's, you know, that's one of his things now is like skating. He does it during his show, and he did it, if I'm not mistaken, on a couple performances, like television performances that he's done over the last couple years. So I think he's a great selection. You know, Usher has hits, decades worth the hits that white people know. Right, because that's all that we will get to the white part of this shortly. But I think that also goes into, you know, whether someone is like a good halftime performer because, you know, just demographically looking at who tunes in to the show, you do with that information what you will.
So you talked about like Usher's longevity, and I think longevity is one of the things that's also important with a Super Bowl performer. We in industry reference like 4 quadrants as like the meeting the 4 different quadrants of demographics, right, of ages and the ways that those things cross. And like the longer someone's been around, the more likely like they're going to be older people who know their songs, younger people who know their songs, and everyone in between. And like Usher having been around for so long has been another reason that it's like, oh, it makes obvious sense that Usher would be doing the Super Bowl. Usher probably could have been done the Super Bowl already. I remember when Bruno Mars was announced as a Super Bowl performer, I did not see it, right? I did not get it. I did not understand why Bruno Mars was getting a Super Bowl performance yet. It felt early to me at the time, which I was wrong. The Super Bowl performance was really, really great. But I do remember being on like I don't know if I would call it a first date, but like it was like a connection with a person that I met online. We weren't like hooking up, but like we were just kind of like meeting each other, and like that announcement had just come out, and we started talking about it, or more so I started talking about it and saying like I didn't think Bruno Mars should be doing the Super Bowl performance, and like he still felt too new, and I didn't think he was like a great stage performer. And the guy responded to me, well, we're working very hard on the Super Bowl performance, and we think we're going to give you a great show. And I was like, living in Los Angeles, I would be having this conversation with someone who is working on said show, and was very embarrassed that we never spoke again. And then the Bruno Mars show actually really did impress.
That was your fault. That's why you always got to ask. You got to be like, well, what do you think first?
You got to ask a follow-up question.
Okay.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
I've not made that mistake again.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so yeah, I think one of the interesting points that when it comes to thinking about the Super Bowl, particularly the more recent years, right? Last year was Rihanna, like you mentioned, and 2021 was like the West Coast hip hop situation that also had like 50 Cent and Eminem and Mary J. Blige, but it highlighted and featured primarily, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Kendrick Lamar. Both of those, right, happening in a post Colin Kaepernick, post, boycott the NFL, post, Rock Nation as, collaborator and advisor specifically on the now Apple Music halftime show. And that strikes me as interesting, right? That particular journey in terms of like the affiliation as it relates to this halftime show, because, I remember you mentioned kind of the ire around Bruno Mars when he was announced as the headliner. But I remember a little bit of that same energy when Coldplay a couple years later was announced as the headliner, and then Beyonce was a supporting performer in that, and as was Bruno Mars, a supporting performer in that, and so we have spoken on this show particularly about the Kaepernick, about the NFL writ large, about Jay-Z and Rock Nation, seemingly flipping sides, if you will. And so I wonder what thoughts you have about how that impacts this conversation about like the role of the Super Bowl and its importance and whatnot, particularly the halftime performance, because you've had a few thoughts on this very show about these entities.
My feelings are all over the place about this, because like we can complain about the NFL's racism and the demographic breakdown of how many players are actually black versus how many like executives and owners or governors and all that kind of stuff, and the disparity there, and the way that it can feel very pandery. Super Bowl performance sometimes feels like we're clear that this is all about bringing an audience in, at least for this 15 minutes, right? Like that this is not like the broader NFL audience. And I think that like we see that all the time. I also think that like if we're calling on an organization to be better, when we see people stepping up to help them do that, we can't be the voice that's telling them that they're wrong for stepping up to help. And so like when we're thinking about Jay-Z and like wanting to go and be a part of the NFL, or when we think about people who want to like be a part of making the change that we're all actually asking for, I get really challenged by the idea that we're like mad at the people who are going to go help make the change that we're all ravenous about. Right. And so like, I go back and forth about like how to feel about it, because like if we want to see change, if we're calling out an organization saying like you need to be better, and then we see people like being brought in to make that change to make it better, we also have to like be able to give space and grace to that. So like that's part of how I feel about this. I also just like I think the Super Bowl halftime show is one of those things that like feels like a space that is increasingly more Black to me. And I've been like going back and looking at like the history of Super Bowl performers just in like the last decade. And I'm like, I don't think it's actually been Blacker, but I feel like I have seen more instances of like Black folks being excited about it. A decade ago, Beyonce performed in 2013. Bruno Mars performed the year after that. We always know that Bruno Mars is very Black adjacent without being Black. Katy Perry followed that. Coldplay with Bruno Mars and Beyonce and others was the year after that. Lady Gaga, Justin Timberlake.
Just a quick point. Lenny Kravitz and Missy Elliott did join Katy Perry that year.
Oh, yes. Really great point. Thank you for that. Coldplay followed after that. Lady Gaga followed after that. Justin Timberlake, who's always... Never mind. Maroon 5 followed the year after that. And then Shakira and Jennifer Lopez, followed by The Weeknd. Snoop Dogg, along with Dr. Dre, Eminem, Mary J. Blige, Kendrick Lamar, the hip-hop West Coast situation that they did was after that. And then Rihanna last year. And Rihanna has been the number one ratings juggernaut, if you will, over the course of all of these years, because Rihanna obviously hadn't performed in a number of years. This was like a return for her. And like it just feels like it is. There are a lot of Black talents that we've seen in the Super Bowl halftime space that are either the headliner or that are also coming in as supporting acts, right? And it just feels very NFL to me.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Say more. You just mean in terms of like Black people propping up this institution that is led by primarily largely white men? That's what you mean?
Black people propping up this nonprofit organization, right? That makes millions and millions of dollars, right? Off of Black people, but like has had a lot of fraught relationship with Black folks, right? I'm always weirded out by the NFL being a nonprofit organization. But like, it is just weird to me that the NFL is always able to use like Black talent in the way that it is, and like still has like so many fraught issues with Black folks.
Sorry, you just shook me calling it a nonprofit. So I said I need to do a quick Google. I said, my God, today somebody answer this question for me. Oh, they are no longer tax exempt. On April 28th, 2015, the NFL commissioner Roger Goodell said the league will no longer be tax exempt. That is interesting. Anyway, I won't get distracted. I will read that article further later. But I was looking beyond that decade that you mentioned, which started with Beyonce. And so 2012 was Madonna. 2011 was the Black Eyed Peas, Usher, and Slash. 2010 was The Who. 2009 was Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band. 2008, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. 2007 was Prince singing Purple Rain, In the Rain. Rolling Stones before that, Paul McCartney. 2004, we obviously all remember the notable Janet Jackson show that also featured Kid Rock, Nelly, Diddy, and Justin Timberlake, of course. And so it does. I do see this blackening. Shout out to the movie that you are mentioning, but it always makes me think about. I feel like the Super Bowl performance, because it is often the most watched, one of the most watched nights on television, right? Every single year. And, you know, Super Bowl performances, right, get Emmy nominations. You know what I mean? And it always strikes me as the kind of like social discourse around like, you know, what does the selection of Usher, right, as the 2024 Super Bowl performer say about where we are as a culture? And more specifically, where the NFL, this halftime show performance, where that is, you know, in its broader kind of trajectory, which always leads me to the question of like, does the Super Bowl performance like even matter? And I guess in terms of just the visibility that you get at that moment, right? In terms of like, oftentimes Super Bowl performances, right, the headliner might release a new album or announce a tour, or, you know, there's some marketing and publicity, you know, benefit, right, from doing this performance, no matter the like level of like whether you are the Rihanna, you know, most watched, or you're, you know, the 10th most watched. It's like a level of visibility that like you can't buy, which is why, right, if I'm not mistaken, right, the performers don't get paid, right?
I don't think they get paid. I'd have to check on that, but I don't think they get like a salary for it. I think it actually, for some of them, might end up costing money, if I'm not mistaken, like depending on what their production looks like. I think they're given a budget for it, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. So it's seen as an investment, right, in a lot of ways for, you know, this broader machine. That's a long way of me repeating my question. Does the Super Bowl matter to you? Does the Super Bowl performer matter?
I think it absolutely matters. I think when we think about with the ways that television viewing has changed over the years, and specifically the ways that like people don't watch as much live television as they used to, we continually see that sports is like one of the top things that people do tune in live for. Mm-hmm. And like it becomes like the top rated thing when, you know, sports is out, like when sports is out.
Like
when football is in season, when it's time for a sports ball season. When we see like football is in season, Monday Night Football and the Sunday games tend to be the highest rated things of the week. When we see basketball is in the playoffs and those different kinds of things, right? Yeah. So we know that it is still a high watermark for ratings on television, but we also know that like the social media engagement gets really high, and it can have like a significant impact for, you know, the person that is performing. So like I would hope that Usher, you know, does have something to roll out after this, right? I don't know how long his contract in Vegas is, but like I would hope that Usher does end up deciding like, okay, well, we can capitalize on this by having a tour that follows, or an album, or, you know, a movie, or whatever it is, a documentary or something.
He just announced an album. He literally announced an album when the announcement for the halftime show came out. So that's coming.
Good for him. Okay.
You know.
Of course, the new music is coming.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm excited for this. I'm excited for this halftime show because Usher's going to turn it, right?
Oh, it's going to be great.
He's going to give us, he's going to give us, wait, what do you think he's going to give us? What do you think set list wise? What do you expect from an Usher?
Usher's right, one of those people who has a lot of hits that are his own, but also has a lot of hits that have, you know, great features. You know what I mean? And so like we really don't, I mean, in the same way that everybody was like, well, Rihanna has a lot of, you know, great features. So like she might bring other people out to like, you know, help her out or whatever.
And she did not.
She didn't end up doing that, right. You know, besides bringing out her baby. But, you know, I feel like Usher is one of those people who, like, he can give you a show where it's just him. I hope he has the exact same backup dancers and team that he's using for his Vegas show, because those motherfuckers
are doing it.
Okay? When I tell you, and it was also a little bit queer inclusive, and I only say a little bit queer inclusive. You know how like every time, you know, the crooners, they always have like backup dancers that are in, you know, male female pairs, mm-hmm. right? As they're, you know, acting out whatever movement and partner play and whatnot that they need to. And so in the Vegas show, there is a same-sex couple, two women's that are partnered as well. Now, he could have gone a little further and gave me a homosexual and a homosexual, but, you know, I understand the audience that we are dealing with here. And so I ain't gonna say nothing.
Or 2 bisexuals, whatever it takes.
Well, for all we know, one of them men's and one of them women's is bisexual. So, maybe I'm the one in the wrong here. Maybe I'm the problem.
You put 2 mask or male presenting people together and they're gay. You know how this culture does it. So it is what it is.
So I say that to say, this is a show that he could bring out all the stops. I see people making jokes on social media already that he needs to bring out Beyonce to perform what is it, Naughty Girl?
I want to see Keke Palmer. Like I just need like a Keke Palmer moment.
Period.
Like I don't need the song necessarily, right? But like it would be such a great payoff for this Keke Palmer story for Keke to show up at the Super Bowl or something. I'm hoping for that.
But guess what? That also would be like a super viral moment. Like not just I'm to be clear, I'm not really talking about the, controversy with her baby daddy and, that whole thing. Or the music, because, she was in his music video for a song that he put out after all of this. They filmed it in the hotel where his show is, because I remembered it. I said, well, that looked familiar. But if Keke Palmer shows up, you gotta give her 2 minutes, cause I need her to do a 1-2 step real quick. Okay, she can give us Bossy. She can give us True Jackson VP. She could give, cause here's the thing. Keke Palmer has also been like leaning into her music bag lately, right, and touring of her own. Like this could be.
Listen.
Who I know on Ursher team? Let me call Rock Nation. Sean.
Yeah, Mr. Carter, please. I'll hold. Here's the thing. This is a Keke Palmer Stan account. I would you get 12 minutes up there. The idea that he's going to give Keke 2 is a push. I think if we could just have like a quick moment, that would be more than enough.
You're right.
Okay, lastly here before we go, is there someone who has not performed at the Super Bowl that you think should? And I'm nervous to ask this because I feel like I'm not nervous. I do expect a Fantasia reference.
First of all, don't be profiling me. Don't be profiling me.
I'm not doing this.
Don't be profiling me. Don't be profiling me, first of all. Because you don't know, I was not going to say Fantasia. Why? Because y'all don't know what to do with a Fantasia Super Bowl performance. You wouldn't know what to do. And so until y'all shape up.
First of all.
I will have her sitting over here in the corner.
Hold on. First of all, the Fantasia Super Bowl performance, in my mind, is as black a moment as there's ever been in Super Bowl history. Like, I haven't seen anybody kick their shoes off at the Super Bowl performance.
I mean,
I haven't seen anybody cry at the Super Bowl performance. I expect. Never mind. Go ahead. Who are you picking?
But I think I think that we're at that moment where a Super Bowl performer is supposed to be somebody who's huge, somebody who you think will have a great, reach, right, in terms of audience. And I'm like, a lot of people have done it, and I would love a Mary J. Blige solo. Like a Mary J. Blige headlined, Super Bowl performance. I know she gave us a little moment, a couple years ago, but I would love to see Mary. I would love to see, this person was rumored to be in the conversation for this year. Taylor Swift. I'm not gonna watch it. I'll let you know that now, but I think a lot of people will.
So that's what I was going to say. There was Taylor Swift is one of the next people that seems like she makes sense to be a Super Bowl performer because of all the different things that she would check off. I also hate the way that we in culture position Taylor Swift and Beyonce as arch nemesis, right? As you're one or the other. I really hate that because we know that Taylor Swift and Beyonce are actually friends with one another, or at least have a friendly relationship with one another. And I don't think that they need to necessarily always be competitively put against each other, but that's a whole different conversation.
Well, who was doing that?
Have you ever seen The Internet Machine?
No, I meant in this conversation.
No. I'm not saying that you are, but I'm saying like, I think there's always like a Taylor Swift hate that is kind of like the undertone of any conversation around Taylor Swift. And I just want to be clear that I'm not participating in it.
Well, I don't like her, but it's not because she's not Beyonce, to be clear.
Wow. Well, there's that. We want to know what y'all think about the Super Bowl halftime conversation and who should be performing that hasn't yet. We want to know what y'all think. Hit us up on the social medias at FANTI Podcast on Instagram, TikTok, and the X. Coming up next, why y'all hate us so much in listener feedback. And we've got a couple dishonorable mentions. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back.
Greatest Trek is the podcast for all your modern Star Trek needs. It's funny, informative, and now it's also timely.
That's because every Friday, right after the release of a new episode of Strange New Worlds, Picard, Lower Decks, Discovery, or Prodigy, we bring you a review of that episode.
There's some great new Star Trek coming up, and we're going to cover all of it.
You'll like our show because we're both former video producers, so we bring a lot of insight into the production and filmmaking aspects to these episodes.
And we also have a very refined sense of humor, so we make lots of delightful fart jokes along the way.
So come see why Greatest Trek is one of the most popular television recap podcasts on all of the internet.
Subscribe to Greatest Trek at MaximumFun.org or in the podcast app you're using right now.
Alrighty, welcome back, beautiful people. We're going to get into our listener feedback segment. We've got 2 emails here this week. The first one is regarding our wonderful, fabulous swimming episode from a one Wyatt Sanak. Longtime listener, first-time commenter. The swimming episode was so great. It was so amazing to hear your swimming journeys, and I found myself feeling so happy for you both for learning to swim. It was really special, and I wanted to say thank you both for taking the step to learn and sharing it. Hope to one day see you dive down to Chocolantis for underwater Freaknik.
Baby, let me tell you, if Chocolantis, if that's a thing, I would be there.
Chocolantis.
The way it's Chocolantis, underwater Freaknik, that sounds like a good time. Anyway, Wyatt, thank you for the love on that. Also, again, shout out to the whole team.
Nasty.
I mean, it sounds like you probably want to take an antibiotic with you, but like, I'm saying,
or 2.
Listen, I'm sure there's a good party or 7. I want to shout out again to the team. Like, for those of you that have gotten to check out the bonus content of us swimming, there's like a beautiful, I think it's 17 minutes video that our team put together of our swimming journey, and it's really, really fantastic. So go check that out.
Shout out to Anne Marie Huber. Shout out to Palmira. Shout out to Laura Swisher. Pew, 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 pew. And we should say really quickly, we should say that, because I had some people, DM me and message me. If you are a financially contributing member of the FANTI fam, you have access to that bonus content. You have to log into your Maximum Fun member account to be able to access it and see it, but it is there. All right. So go do that. All right. We've got an email here from someone who's asked to be remained anonymous. And this is regarding a tough question from our episode a while back about learning in public. The person says, "Hi, Fantai Chommies. I hope you're well. Chommies is South African lingo for friends." Okay, thank you for letting me know. I acknowledge that I did send this as an Instagram DM, but y'all were taking your sweet time talking about the question, so I figured an email could work better. Sorry for the long email in advance. All right, you sure this not Dr. Diet in secret with the long emails? I'm just kidding. Side note, I saw at my book talk in Boston this past weekend, Dr. Diet was there. So I got a picture with her and everything. Shout out to her.
I saw y'all's photo on Instagram.
It was so cute, wasn't it? Look at us. We also will have Dr. Diet on the pod in a few weeks, so y'all stay tuned for that. Okay, back to this letter. Okay. Your tough question regarding calling the police in a previous episode about learning in public brought to my attention my concern with police and abolition. I noticed on social media and in the United States at least a growing desire for prison abolition. I understand the intent behind it as Black people in America, if not globally, have been dealt an unfair hand at the hands of authority, from police brutality to violence at the hands of the state, even in prisons. My concern, however, as a sexual assault survivor is what about abusers, murderers, serial killers, rapists, serial serial rapists and rapists? What about people who've committed grave sexual violence? Should we not call the police on them and have them held accountable? Let me be clear. I am aware that sexual assault survivors get gaslit and victim blamed by police and the courts. My concern is that people might use this move towards abolition to silence survivors of grave harm like sexual violence from ever coming forward and reporting their assailants, especially if the assailant is a black man or person. I'm talking about situations where marginalized people like black trans women or black cis women would report a black man raping, sexually assaulting them. Do they not deserve justice and to call the police? Do the perpetrators not deserve to face consequence? Or is it just abolition at all costs, even if marginalized people are violated and their violators get no repercussions? As a survivor, I'm not really keen on the idea that those who harmed me should not face some consequences, and I am aware why victims don't come forward. Also, maybe this is me, this comes from the writer, but as someone who's also disabled and neurodivergent, I wonder whether we are even included in conversations regarding accountability in sexual trauma. Yes, I acknowledge black disabled people are more likely to be incarcerated, but I heard instances of transformative justice being used to silence victims of sexual trauma, and I fear that might begin to be the case with prison abolition. After all, my fear that if I share this, my neurodivergence will be used to silence me. It has been weaponized against me before to gaslight me, so because of that and 50 other traumas, I always assume people, when I dare bring this up, will silence me using my neurodivergence. Open to your conversation and your opinions regarding this. I'm not trying to be the prison abolition version of a TERF. My concern is with victims of sexual trauma and domestic abuse, especially because we are so silent and gaslit and marginalized. I might as well classify sexual assault and domestic abuse survivors as an oppressed class. Interesting. Congratulations on Historically Black Phrasing. I hope it will be a bestseller. This is a hint for you, Jarrett. I'm the bitch Jarrett joked lacked taste. Love you, Jarrett, but I'm side-eyeing you. Whoops. There it is.
Well, I mean, you can't side-eye me after making me now question your taste. So there's that. But I think the central question here is about whether or not, like, we think prison should happen for people who are like violent criminals or sexual criminals. That's kind of like where I'm hearing is where we're boiling it down to. And I would say, and you also use the word like, do victims not deserve justice, right? And so a couple of things come up for me when I hear that, because number one, I would say like I don't use the word justice in that way. I would use the word accountability, because I think it's always important that we are aware that like justice would be this thing not happening to you. Accountability would be that person being punished or going to jail, in the same way that we have these conversations around police killings of black folks, right? We want justice for this person. No, we actually want accountability for this person. Justice would mean that they were able to be alive and be able to live in a society that wouldn't kill them. So I just want to position that. But I think that when we're having this conversation, and I do not have all the answers here, and there are people who are far better versed in this conversation than I am, but really the conversation is more about the fact that we need to have a different system, right? And so whether or not that violent criminal or sexual assaulter, it's not so much about whether or not they should be in prison so much as like we need a system that is like rehabilitating folks, right? We use this language of the Department of Corrections when we talk about prison, but like there's the way that we're so quote unquote correcting people is not effective, right? Because we see recidivism rates, we see the ways that people go back to prison after having been in prison. We see the mass incarceration that we actually talked about in the A segment, of the over incarceration of black folks, right? And so when we're thinking about how we could better treat people who are convicted of crimes, sometimes the conversation is more about like, what's actually wrong here with this person, right? Why is this happening? Why is this person behaving in this way? And what is the way that we could make them better? And some of that might be isolation, right? Some of that might be, removing them from society. I don't mean isolation in the way that we talk about solitary confinement, because solitary confinement is its own fuckery, but like more so the fact that we should be having rehabilitative systems to be able to better serve these people, so that when they come back out into society, they're able to be better contributors to society and not necessarily just going back to prison. And so I fully hear where you're coming from about like, do these violent criminals not deserve to have some kind of punishment or accountability? Absolutely. What that looks like and the ways that we can make it better is really the conversation that I think a lot of us are having.
Yeah, I don't think we've done an episode on prison abolition. Have we?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, let's add that to the queue because I think there are resources that exist that can answer and tease out the specifics around your question about and your edit, Jarrett, which is about what accountability looks like for, those folks who make, who enact such violences. There are resources that you can look up that will tease out how prison abolitionists think about, what that type of accountability can look like. I am not well versed. We can find somebody and bring them on the show to dive into this, because I think the conversation around prison abolition is a good one. I would suggest Are Prisons Obsolete by Angela Davis as a text that might be useful in one's self-education around this issue and the various particulars. And I would just add to your point, Jarrett, about the kind of re-articulation or reframing of what justice is and what that looks like. I would say, and then this other question here where you have the writer said, do they not deserve justice and to call the police? Do the perpetrators not deserve to face consequence? Or is it just abolition at all costs, even if marginalized people are violated and their violators get no repercussions? So that sort of equating and binary positioning on this issue won't be helpful in teasing out what a world looks like without prisons, because it can't, and so there's a whole lot of gray area and nuance and complexity in that, and I have never heard, to be clear, any of the prison abolitionists that are in my life shy away from those complexities, but if one were to do so, that would make this a Republican talking point.
Well, last thing here, because I know that we spent more time on this than we really intended to. I've done some coverage over the years on jails and prison and incarceration, and I remember doing a story where we talked about how they were trying out different models for how we incarcerate people, and how we put them into this Department of Corrections and using models from other countries. The ways that we do incarceration in the United States is very unique, right, and is very inflated by comparison to other countries. So it's something that we can definitely have more conversation on in a future show. I made sure to take note of that so that we can talk about it. But thank you for this letter. And now it's time for our dishonorable mentions. These are the stories of people that caught our attention this week that deserve a call out either for their good or for their stupid. Tre'vell, what you got?
I just wanted to give a shout out. I mentioned this kind of already earlier to the FANTI fammers and the WAD squatters who showed up to my book talk in Boston. And it was so great. We had a great little turnout. Also, shout out to the All She Wrote bookstore who hosted us, as well as the Connection United Methodist Church, I believe is their full name. They were the All She Wrote bookstore, which is the Boston area's, I think, oldest and maybe only queer-owned bookstore, is being displaced from their current location. They're being forced to move. They're currently raising money to support that move. So if anybody out there got a couple extra dollars that you would like to throw their way, please consider doing so. But because they are transitioning from spaces, they are now holding all of their book events at the Connection United Methodist Church, which is a queer and trans affirming church in the Boston area. It's in Somerville. And so shout out to Jordan, who is their pastor over there, and hosted us. It was really, really, really interesting to be having a book talk about Black transness in a church. But the church has this free library, this queer affirming free library where they have all these books by queer and trans authors and other authors that, the local community can come in and literally take it with them. So it's really beautiful. Again, shout out to all of the FANTI famers and the WAD squad who showed up. Many of them also bought copies of Historically Black Phrases from I Ain't One of Your Little Friends, to who all gonna be there as well. So, she was pulling double duty, this weekend. So shout out to them.
Nice. Okay. I just want to give a quick note here. I saw this story came from Them, the publication over at Condé Nast that focuses on LGBTQ plus stories. And I just saw this headline and this photo, and I'm going to make sure that we put a link to it in our episode notes here. But there's a story, the headline that said, "Meet the Black Gay Partners Preserving Harriet Tubman's Ancestral Land." There are these two Black women named Donna Deere and Paulette Green, and they are these Black queer women who own this land that I can't read all of it because we don't have time, but they have been together for 50 years, and now they own this land that was a part of the Underground Railroad, and they're preserving it, and it's just a really, really cool story. So shout out to the two of them because I really enjoyed that story. Anyway, that said, it is now time for
Black History is happening every day. Alrighty, this week we are talking about Lester Prez Young, an American jazz tenor saxophone player who was a prominent member of Count Basie's orchestra, the big band that's from the big band swing era. For those who don't know their history, Young is said to be one of the most influential saxophone players of the genre. He's not only known for his musical talents, but also for coining this staple in Black American language and language all around the world, the word cool. Starting in 1933, cool meant fashionable, and by the late 1940s was just a general phrase of approval. The term was used as more of a bop talk, quote unquote, that's what they call it, or in reference to a certain style of jazz before it expanded to the gen population. Okay, Lester Young was also said to have coined the term bread, referring to money as well, like you spelled his bread, after he got paid for doing a gig. Shout out to Black people. And in case you were wondering, Historically Black Phrases from any one of your friends to who all gonna be there is available for purchase wherever you get wonderful and bad books too. Also available on audiobook.
Before we go, I want to let you know of a few different places that you'll be able to see Tre'vell and I. We are going to be appearing on A Word with Jason Johnson, the podcast from Slate, in an upcoming episode. We'll also be on The Clay Kane Show. For those of you that are listening on Thursday, we will have been live on the Wednesday episode, so you'll be able to check that out in podcast form. The Clay Kane Show is from Urban View over on SiriusXM. We are also on something else, girl. Oh, on Tuesday, I was on the Black Talk Radio Network and on Areva Martin's show. So we've been popping up in various different places talking about our book and the different things happening in the world. So make sure to check us out there. Tre'vell already told you that Historically Black Phrases is available right now wherever you go and get fine books and shitty ones too, with a full explanation of why you can get shitty ones as well in last week's episode. And you can go to historicallyblackphrases.com for places to find the book and for things that are upcoming. Want to remind you that We See Each Other, the podcast, is available right now as well. You can stream all of the episodes of it wherever you get your fine audio, and check out Tre'vell's book, We See Each Other, A Black Trans Journey Through TV and Film, wherever you get good or bad content from Tre'vell.
For the record, I only do great content, but I make space for other people's perception, which is wrong, of my content. Anyway.
Duly noted. We appreciate y'all watching. If you're watching us on YouTube and just now finding the show, because, there's not many of you watching on YouTube, but if you are on YouTube, you go to fantipodcast.com and check out all of the past seasons of the show. And for those of you that are listening on the pod, the YouTube version of the show is so good. The team is doing such a fantastic job on putting it together. So go to YouTube, check out. We have a new channel as well for the FANTI feed. So it has all of the FANTI stuff in there that is separate from the Max Fun channel. So make sure to go check out the FANTI channel on YouTube and subscribe. If you have a comment or suggestion about this week's show, we're at FANTI Podcast on the Instagram, on the TikTok, and over on X, formerly known as Twitter. Use the hashtag FANTIFam, or you can send us an email to fanti@maximumfun.org.
As always, if you would like to support support the work that we do here, you can become a member at MaximumFun.org/join. That's how you can, give us a couple dollars, every month to support this work. Our music is brought to you by Corece, the Grammy Award-winning Corece, COR.ECE, wherever you get wonderful music. Our graphics are by Ashley Nguyen and the folks over at Moonhouse Creative. Our editor is Anne-Marie Huber. Our producer is Palmira Muniz. And our senior producer is... Sorry.
Wow, you were really, really steaming through there. Our senior producer is Laura Swisher. This is a production of Maximum Fun.